All right, let's see if I can knock this out in 45 minutes or under. Otherwise, it will cut off because this is the free version of Zoom. Anyhow, I'm about to go over how to win any argument, 101. And basically, so the title is almost clickbait in a sense because it is specifically made for arguments, and because arguments are probably the most vital point of any type of conversation. However, this works for basic communication. This works for sales tactics, at least the majority of these 11 steps. So we'll get right to it. I will start with the most important part, and I'll probably say this a few times. Oh, this is the most important part. It's all very important to me. However, in any type of communication, especially arguments, essentially what you are doing is you are selling your viewpoint to the other person. Now there's 7.5 billion people in the world, so there's 7.5 billion different ways that people view the world. So your view of a subject or just the world in general, if you're trying to convey that idea to the other person, you have to sell it. And this is really applicable to anything. So if you look at it through that lens, then there are ways we cannot manipulate our idea, but persuade the other person into seeing it your way. Especially in sales type environment, people will understand the general salesman. So they're very, they push back a lot. So these techniques are used to remove their barriers and sell your idea as quickly as possible. Now, this is definitely the most important part. I shouldn't use that for the first one, but this is actually the first step. Beat their argument in your mind first. I've done this for at least a decade, and especially studying law, criminal law to be more specific. To be a good prosecutor, you have to be a better defense attorney. To be a good defense attorney, you got to be a better prosecutor. You have to be able to turn the chessboard, see their pieces, and then know how to beat them. This also helps create your planned rebuttals. So typically when you have an argument or a disagreement with a person, or you're just trying to sell your idea to a person, they have about, let's just say 2 to 3 common disagreements with you. These are even sometimes without even having a conversation with the person prior or hearing any of their complaints, you can usually kind of guess what their 3 top is going to be. Once you understand this, once you turn the chessboard and you beat those arguments one by one, when the argument actually happens, the planned rebuttal is programmed in your head and you already know exactly how to navigate through. Second, eye movement. People will probably find this a bit debatable. However, I learned this. I can't remember. There's probably a more professional term for it. I don't remember because it's been quite a while. I've tested it out as well. And once I explain it to you, you'll probably say, okay, that does make a little bit of sense, or I've observed this in the past with other people. But eye movements. So, general rule of thumb, especially when you're dealing with a stranger, if their eyes usually face toward the ground when they're speaking to you, which is usually me, it's a me type of person, or if their eyes are going down, it means I like a more quiet environment. I need you closer. I need slower, lighter tone, and let's be more personal. Okay. People that usually shoot their eyes up, they stare up into the sky when they're speaking, almost like to an audience. They're louder. They're more extroverted type of people. So they like their space. They're like at least an arm's distance so they can, shout to the top of their lungs, if you will. It's kind of significant because, and you can usually test this theory just by watching someone for about a minute or two. But it's kind of significant because if you switch those roles, say if if you're a louder person that's from a distance talking to someone that is introverted, close, quiet, eyes down to the ground, you're not going to be a good mix for that person, which is going to make you selling your idea or you winning the argument that much harder. And it won't be on the conscious level. The person won't consciously say, oh, I don't like that thing about you. But it'll drive a thought into their head that says, red flag, I need to steer away from this. Meta model. Basically, the meta model in neurolinguistic programming is simply just questioning something from every single angle. Now, questioning is, I'll probably make a separate video specifically about questioning. It sounds like it will be boring, but it's not. Because once, just like when you flip the chessboard and create your planned rebuttals for what you're going to say to the person that you're trying to win over or sell your idea, questioning becomes extremely important, because not only for them to discover what is the real issue at hand, but for you to discover what's the real issue at hand. So a lot of people have like minor disagreements or minor complaints, but sometimes it's deeper than that or not as deep. And they don't understand that until you ask them questions and they become consciously aware of what they're even thinking. And once they do, then you are. And the best way to do this, and I've used this for many different topics, is if you've ever spoken to me on the phone or anything like that, then you know I've used this probably before. But you go macro to micro, meaning step outside the box, look at the issue as a whole, and then ask a question, narrow down, ask a question, narrow down until you get to the finest point. But to get to the finest point, you can't start there or anywhere close near. You need to back all the way outside the box and say, oh, kind of like economics in the United States. You have to look at it as a full picture. And then you can ask a question, you can narrow it down here, or you can narrow it down here, and you can go all the way to the finest point. It's very simple process, but you would be surprised how many people will not allow themselves to step outside the box, see the full picture, and then just like a funnel all the way down to the finest point. This also helps you acquire, in other terms, I guess, it helps you acquire your primary target in the argument. So you're trying to funnel down to the very thing that is keeping you from winning that argument, the very thing they're holding close dear to them. Let's see. The next one I once again hinted on many different times, because this can be applicable to especially relationships, but parenting, pretty much anything. It's what we learned in the Marine Corps called the cage dog theory. Now I'll explain it from the tactical perspective in the Marine Corps, which will help you learn how I'm about to explain cage dog theory, which actually goes into step number 5. We'll get there in a second. It'll all make sense. But so the cage dog theory is, if at possible, say you have to clear a building out from any enemy combatants, if possible, start at the top floor and then clear all the way down to the bottom. So at minimum, the enemy will run out the building, okay? But if you clear from the bottom up and the enemy's at the top floor, there's nowhere to go, they are now the caged dog. So when you are the caged dog, your adrenaline pumps, you're in defense mode, and it's fight or flight. Meaning, when you clear all the way to the top floor and they're in a corner, they are now 10 times the person they were on the bottom floor, because they know it's either live or die. And the same thing applies for arguments, generally, or not just arguments, but pretty much any topic. If you corner someone, if you put them in that caged dog scenario, you will not get the results that are what you're looking for, because people, their adrenaline pumps, they're irrational, and it's fight or flight. You don't want to argue. You don't want to converse with people like that. Once again, it's a super important part, because with the cage dog theory, you can win an argument up to 95% of the argument. And then that last 5%, you can corner them and all hell breaks loose. They'll slam something, they'll walk away. No result, no positive feedback, all went to crap because you caged them. Next point, which I was just trying to make, is this is actually my favorite. I use this a lot. I would like to say I'm a natural, and anybody that knows me closely knows this is my forte. This is what I do the best probably in the world. But I don't even really know how to formulate it. And I wouldn't say I'm a natural. I think it just takes time and training. But metaphors. Metaphors are the most beautiful, in my opinion, the most beautiful key to any conversation and to any argument. And two reasons as to why that is. So you can just take one scenario and you can apply it to a secondary scenario. That is not your argument. That is not your conversation. But the significance between the second one and the first, the second one is easier to understand because they already set in their ways. They have their specific thought about an issue. But a second one is easier to understand. It's more basic. And all the emotions that are attached to the first one, your argument at hand or your conversation at hand, no longer applies in the second one. So if you can, on the spot, which is not the easiest thing to do, but with practice, very easy. If on the spot you can come up with a metaphor, they might disagree with you in scenario one. But if you create a scenario two and say, well, what about this scenario? And how do you see how it can apply? It could possibly apply. And would you agree to that? This is how you open this is how you're giving people a way out. They can be stuck in their prideful ways of an argument. But if you say, well, let me put it this way. Maybe this is a bit confusing. Maybe let me put it this way. And does this scenario make sense to you? And they're like, yeah, you know what? I guess you just helped me understand your thing. So that way it's like, they're not having to fold. They're not have to throw up the white flag. They're simply saying, okay, I see it in a different light now. Thank you for showing that to me. And you win. And you win. So metaphors, by far my favorite thing. Once again, it can be applied to anything, communication, arguments, parenting, especially when you're trying to communicate with a 3 or 4-year-old where they don't really understand what you're talking about, but you can create that metaphor and they're like, oh, okay, gotcha. This is bad, this is good, don't do this, do that, gotcha. The next two, oh no, I think I skipped one. Tag questions. So I think I'm rolling through this a little bit quicker than expected, but here's the crazy part. I just noticed it's like I think last time I was using Zoom, there's not a timer anywhere. I have no idea where at what time I started. So anyways, I got 45 minutes. So I think I'm rolling about a little bit too quickly. Either way, I'm more than likely going to break each one of these down and make a separate video, but I just wanted to put like a 10, 11, 12 step video together to how to create this mathematical equation to win arguments. Next is going to be tag questions. Now, this is kind of more psychological than philosophical, I guess, but tag questions are simply questions that you attach at the end of a statement that makes the listener believe that the statement you just said was correct by asking it in a question form. So an example would be, I just bought brand new black dress shoes. They look great, don't they? When you say your statement is they look great, the comma, don't they question mark is putting that perception that you are correct into that listener's mind. So kind of like that makes sense, doesn't it? Or you're smart enough to get my point, aren't you? The person subconsciously agrees with what you're saying because the question is actually a statement. Hopefully I explained that correctly, but a tag question is simply 2-3 words at the end of a statement that reaffirms your statement by asking them, that's right, right? You know that's right. The next two The next two are kind of hit or miss. They're very important, but they're kind of hit or miss because it depends on the level in which you use them. First being humor. So I love to add humor to everything. It brings any heightened emotions, especially in arguments. It can bottom them out to the equal level. Okay, back where you started. Simply by making a joke, maybe that's something not so much serious, but a little serious, or maybe a side joke, or wow, did you just see what just happened over there while we were just arguing, and have that side laugh, emotions drop, now you're back to square one. However, if used improperly, you can spoil the whole deal, because it's 2022. People are easily offended, especially with jokes. I know firsthand. So you have to, I guess, play it cool when it comes to humor. If you find, and you'll know when it happens, if you find that just beautiful timing to crack a side joke, it will benefit you. Even if you're winning 100%, still do it. Brings the emotions down. Emotions are horrible in arguments, because when you use emotions, you throw logic out of the window, and logic should be key. Humility. So humility is extremely important, especially in sales, because as I explained earlier, people have a general understanding of salespeople, especially when you cold call them. And when you cold call as a salesman, the person that picks up the phone immediately identifies you as a threat. You're a threat. You're trying to get my money. It's the first thing in their head. Even if what you're selling is great, even if it's cheap, even if it's going to make them a lot of money, you're immediately a threat. You have just a few seconds to become that authority figure. And with that, what's important to follow up with you being the authority figure. And a lot of sales gurus will not tell you this at all, but it's vital. You have to use humility. You have to, once again, you got to be smart. You can't say, oh, this is my first day. I don't even know what I'm doing. Sorry, my bad. No, but anytime you can take a jab at your own self, your own personality. Here's an example I've actually used a few times, and it works well. Let's say our company made a mistake. I can't remember the exact example I gave. We made a mistake, or it was a first-time call to a business to get sales, etc. And I know I'm speaking to the right person. The first thing I do on the phone is, hey, hello? Oh, this is Chris Fields. Hold on 1 second. This is awkward, but I just dropped my entire coffee cup in my lap, and my leg is on fire. So if you could give me like 2 seconds. And this drops the threat level that is perceived about you, drops it. Because you're just now an ordinary person. They've done the same thing. They know probably somebody in their office has done exactly the same thing this morning. Oh, okay. We're all humans here. We all put our pants on the same way. So the humility is extremely important, but you can't degrade your authenticity. You can't degrade your level of brightness on the subject that you're trying to sell. And by sell, in an argument, it's your idea. So humility definitely works very well. I've used it so many times. It's my favorite thing, because I have so many reasons to crack jokes about my own self. So I use them as much as possible. Next is half agree. So sometimes in an argument, somebody will go on this long stint of pieces as to why you're wrong or whatever. You can find either one that you agree with, or let's say they accuse you of 5 things. You can definitely agree with your small faults. You're right. I totally shouldn't have done that. You are 100%. I wouldn't argue on that one. My bad. Totally. Or, yeah, I definitely see your point in that. I actually never thought about that before. I'm glad you brought that to my attention. But half agree, give a little, in return to take a lot. You can lose battles and win the war. So what I mean by half agree is agree to a little bit, but long-term plan, I'm going to win this argument, hands down. But those tiny things that don't really matter, they're almost irrelevant. Definitely shoot for the most irrelevant points. At the end, you win. Lower and slower tone of voice, super important. You ever had an argument with someone or seen an argument with someone, and the louder they get, the more they realize they're getting loud, and what they do is get louder and then louder and then louder. So I actually learned this. When in the police academy. But if someone's loud, which once again, emotions are not great. They're horrible when it comes to arguing or just simply communicating. Emotions, you need to put them at bay. But if you have someone that you're speaking to is very loud and you just start to lower your voice just like this, almost to a whisper, so they can just barely hear you, subconsciously, they'll become aware that this person is speaking, but I don't know what they are saying. I need to lower my voice so I can hear them. And they do. And they'll drop their voice subconsciously. The same thing, not just lower your voice, but at a slower repetition. So you'll start talking maybe at this speed. And it subconsciously calms the person listening to your argument. Last point is actually not necessary, but it kind of depends where you are. Like if you're in a area where you're sitting down or something. I have picked up number 11 through like NLP training, but the same exact theory or same exact method with the tone of voice is hand gestures. So you can use your flat hand. Just I can't really do it good on here, but slowly, slowly start. Hold the tapping the table, or maybe if you're very close to the person, the end of their leg or something, and you can slow the tone by your hand, and you get slower and slower, and people will subconsciously reciprocate. I'm always horrible at saying that word, by the way. I probably shouldn't even attempt it. Let me reciprocate. There we go. People will reciprocate. I should have just stuck with the second. They will mimic this same type of lowering of the tone and attitude just by watching your hand. Now, there's a deeper level of that called mirroring and leading or pacing. And that'll be for a different video where you can do it with all movements of your body. But just for a simple, basic argument or communication or conversation, you can use your hand. And if you're trying to make a very specific point, you can use your pointer finger. But pay attention to this. Don't ever point your finger, because that puts people back in the caged dog theory. Defense mode. I'm in trouble because humans, especially if you're 35 like myself, you grew up and you've seen millions of examples of this, that, and that always means the person on the other end of that finger is wrong or bad. That's the pattern we create in our brains. So that's in the majority of people, in the high majority of people. They see somebody point a finger at them, conversation's over. Screw you is what they're going to come back with. Lastly, I think this went quicker than possible, which is great. So these 11 tips, I can tell you, tried and tested, work. If I were you, I would write them down 1 through 11. And maybe once a day, maybe even once a week, just glance over them. And the reason for that is if you knew none of these and tomorrow you try to have an argument, you're not going to remember most of them. And over time, if you just look, glance, or even practice here, there, they will become part of your muscle memory. I have to think about none of these things. If I'm in a serious argument or conversation, all of these are already stored up here. I use these without me even knowing them. Later on, I can pick up on the things I did or the things I said. This happens all the time. I have many witnesses that I use these on a daily basis, but not even consciously. They're just programmed in there over about 10 years. And I'm not saying it takes 10 years to program these, but simply look over them, study them kind of like you would study for a test, and they'll become part of your everyday process. That is the most important thing with anything NLP related, anything therapy related or life coach related or whatever you want to call it. Repetition becomes muscle memory, sticks in your brain, you use it without thinking about it, which is the goal. I think that's it for now. If you have any questions, yeah, that's definitely everything. I knocked that out a lot quicker than I thought I was going to, so that's great. I definitely could have expanded. I will expand on a lot of these in the near future, but if you have any questions, put them in the comment section. I'm not really sure how I'm going to post this video yet, but yeah, I'm all ears. I have questions and I can definitely dive deeper into each of the 11 steps. And I'm not saying that's the only 11 steps either. There's other things you can do, but when I sat down and created this, I was like, these are definitely the best things. I think most of these, if not, yeah, I think almost all of these are in my book on my website. So it's a fairly cheap book if you want to pick it up. And I do expand a little bit into each one of these. But anyhow, that is it for now.